Good afternoon. It's Wednesday. I'm Sal Greco, and you're watching and listening to the Sal Greco Show. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button. If you're watching us on Rumble, hit the follow button, hit the Rumble button, hit the like button. And if you're listening on any major podcast streaming platforms, please like, share, and subscribe. Well, there's a lot in the news. There's a lot going on with this Eric Adams case. There's a lot going on with the New York City Police Department. So I brought on our favorite legal expert and defense attorney, Sarena Townsend, and she'll be on to explain this a little better to the audience. So without any further ado, let's get right to it. All right, so with me today to discuss all kinds of legal matters involving numerous subjects, Sarena Townsend, thank you for coming back to the show. By the way, you're very much I'd say requested by all the audience that keep requesting your name. So how have you been, Sarena?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you to everybody who's requesting me. It's an honor, honestly. So thank you, Sal. It's great to be here.
Thank you. And I think I really appreciate your opinion on things, or at least your legal take, because you are actually someone who, again, worked in the Eric Adams administration and was a prosecutor in the Brooklyn's DA's office. So you know what we're talking about, unlike many, like an Andrew Weissman, who's a career like bureaucrat in the DOJ. Even though he's a prosecutor, he's a career. So what he says, you take with a grain of salt. What you say makes more sense because you don't really have any dirty, you're not doing political witch hunts and stuff like Weissman. So I take your opinion very highly, which is why I keep having you back on, and the audience does also.
Thank you.
So to start, obviously, what else can I say? Eric Adams is in the news. To set the table, if people don't know, if they're living under a rock, Eric Adams' case was dismissed, or the attempt to dismiss, by Trump's Justice Department, the acting deputy attorney general, Emil Bove, who was placed there by Boris Epstein, another character in Trump world that has a lot of shenanigans surrounding him. But anyway, he filed a Article 48, I guess, on his own, because everyone resigned in protest, and they wrote beautiful memos to the Justice Department. I don't think there's anything corrupt about any of these people. Sometimes what you see is what it is. There's nothing political or any alternative motives. Look, I was in a police department, right? So if I made an arrest of someone and they're a drunk driver, are they going to say, no, that's a political arrest because this guy voted differently? I mean, you guys, some of you people are way out in left field, conspiracy world, low information world. I'm trying to grab you and put you back in your chair and go, relax. We're going to now give you some facts. So before I show any documents, what was your take over what happened? Danielle Sassone resigned. She was the head of the Southern District of New York. She was put there by Trump's DOJ. She's a conservative, part of Federalist Society, and also clerked on the Antonin Scalia. She gave a scolding memo, which was fact-based. There wasn't one lie on there, and it's very troubling to hear about this quid pro quo where there were notes that were taken away, and that I believe Alex Spiro was trying to tell the Justice Department how things. So basically, it's like a favor, which is a hoodwink, and that is highly unethical. And the reason why no prosecutor put their name on this Article 48, because there are no grounds to dismiss this case. So maybe you could lay this out better than me, since you're a lawyer, and you could explain this to the audience.
Well, the first thing I want to say, Sal, is that anybody who was like, oh, you guys were wrong, they're going to pardon Adams, they're going to just dismiss the case. And you and I were saying, nah, things are just heating up over there at SDNY in the Southern District. We were right, okay? Even though Trump's people might have tried to do their thing, and it might still end up that the case gets dismissed, we don't know. We're going to talk that through. But the point is, we were right that the Southern District itself, the actual prosecutors were heating up. And in fact, Danielle Sassoon mentioned in her resignation letter that they, in fact, were prepared to file a superseding indictment with more charges against Eric Adams for basically tampering with evidence, destroying evidence. So everything that we thought was going to happen was planning on happening until this, like, Emil Boll, like, swooped in and just kind of took things under his control and tried to get them to dismiss the case. So what I thought when I first saw all of this go down, this is like a whirlwind. This is crazy, right? At first I was like, oh my God, they're dismissing the case because Trump is making them do it, or this dude Bove is making them do it. First things first, he's not asking for it to be a full dismissal. He wants to hold that carrot. He wants to make sure that they got Eric Adams on a leash and make sure that he's a good boy, because they're not going to just dismiss it without prejudice, with prejudice. They want to dismiss the case without prejudice. And for you viewers who may not be as into this as me and Sal are, that means that the case is not fully dismissed completely forever, never to be resurrected. It means that they want the case to be dismissed with the option of bringing those charges back, basically, if Eric Adams doesn't behave himself. Now, the big thing that, right, I know it's crazy. It's literally the most obvious quid pro quo ever, because the letter basically says, we're not asking you to dismiss this case because he didn't do it, or he's innocent, or the case is weak. Nothing. They specifically say in the letter, we're not asking you to dismiss this case based on the merits of the case. In fact, we think you guys did a great job. We think that you guys are, above reproach, and that this was done the right way. It has nothing to do with your ability. It has nothing to do with the merits of the case. Why do we want you to dismiss the case? 2 reasons. Number one, because Damian Williams, the former U.S. attorney, made public comments pre-trial that were prejudicial to Eric Adams, and therefore he tainted the jury pool. And number two, because we want Eric Adams to participate in all the immigration policies that President Trump wants him to participate in. And this prosecution is simply taking too much of his time. It's affecting his ability to do his job. Now, I got to say this, and I'm going to let you say everything I'm sure you want to say. When I saw that those were the 2 reasons, I almost vomited, because honestly, when was the last time, right? You're a former police officer. I'm a former prosecutor of a decade. When was the last time we dismissed charges against a defendant because the charges were interfering with the defendant's ability to do his job, or because somebody made a public statement about the defendant before trial? First of all, Eric Adams was on the Luigi Mangione perp walk and making all sorts of statements about how he's guilty, and he thinks that that's okay. But when people do it about him, it's not okay. This is insane. So Sal, kudos to Danielle Sassoon. She did the right thing. And the other 7 prosecutors who, retired or resigned in protest, good for them for standing up for their morals. I know how it feels to be asked by the Eric Adams administration to do something illegal, to do something against the morals of a prosecutor or against the morals of an attorney, and to just say no and then get screwed over it. It's fine. You're going to be okay because you ended up doing the right thing. So that's how I felt about the whole thing.
Yeah, Sarena, I would say I don't even know what to say, because they're now facing those hearings. I believe the Justice Department hearings for the attorneys when they disobey an order, even if that order is unlawful and unconstitutional, illegal, unethical, whatever you want to call this. And it's funny that you mentioned it. So basically, the case is being dismissed temporarily on grounds of political matters. There is no ground. It isn't like, the prosecution, we don't have the evidence, or there's a witness that is, they're not credible. It's just political, which is that is not grounds for his case dismissal. And now you're seeing the amicus briefs being filed by a slew of attorneys, which would slow this whole process down. And them turning this into a political theater now. And it's basically an unnecessary, inflicted wound by the president here. I don't think this was nowhere on the radar. You're right. Most of America could care less about Eric Adams, but now they have grounds to say this is corruption. And the appearance of corruption right now is tremendous. Whether President Trump did it himself or this idiot Bove did it on his own, the appearance is corruption. And people that keep saying these are Turkish airline upgrades, may I remind you that the pending indictments that were to proceed forward, and I said this on Sid Rosenberg's show, and I truly believe this, the Justice Department, the Southern District of New York, was holding this indictment to see what the Trump DOJ was going to do. Had they brought these charges forward initially right away, they could have dismissed the entire case. Instead, with the DOJ saying you have to dismiss it, well, no, we had all these other pending charges. And what were they? Well, we already know about the straw donor schemes and all of that. But in one instance, Mohammed Bahi, who was an aide to Eric Adams' administration, he pled guilty. And while he was pleading guilty, he had mentioned that the other co-conspirator defendant, which now turned into a witness, Erdogan Erkan, which is one of the straw donors from Turkey, was giving money to Eric Adams. He went to his house, Mohammed Bahi, and he stated to him that Eric had told him, don't worry about the FBI. Don't worry, they won't find the cash. That is witness tampering. That is obstruction of justice. And that's, quite frankly, a street thug operating like a mob boss, despite the fact this is a candidate for political office. At the time he held office, he was the Brooklyn Borough president. So that is sickening to hear that. So to say there's no evidence against him or he's done nothing wrong is a complete farce. And somehow there are people defending him. You can defend them all you want, but the facts are the case, and the crux of it are what we're saying here. So I wanted to show you the latest that's being done in the last 24 to 48 hours, because there's so much going on here, I can't keep track. I can't.
It's so true.
So here is now, I see this. This looks like a notice of appearance in the case from the government. It says, to the clerk of the court, the undersigned attorney respectfully requests the clerk to note her appearance in this case and to add her as filing user to whom notice of electronic filing will be transmitted in this case. And that's Antoinette T. Bacon, Supervisory Official, Criminal Division, U.S. Justice Department, and obviously she's from D.C. So I don't know if you could just explain this to the audience before I show the next document.
Yeah. Well, basically everybody in New York is saying we're not dismissing this case. The attorneys, the prosecutors, the federal prosecutors in SDNY were like, we're not doing it. We can't in good faith make these arguments. And it is true, as a former prosecutor, you are drilled pretty early on that you cannot make misrepresentations on the record and that your arguments need to be made in good faith. And these arguments, the lawyers are not feeling like they're making good faith arguments to a judge to dismiss the case. They do not believe that it is the judicious thing to dismiss this case, and therefore they can't make that record. So the New York lawyers say, we're not doing it. So then the case was moved to DC, to DOJ Maine is what they call it. Basically the main area of the Department of Justice, and it's going to be handled by those prosecutors. Now, a bunch of those prosecutors also said that they didn't want to go forward with the case either, to dismiss the case either, and they didn't want to make those arguments either. We had 7 other prosecutors resign. One of them wrote an amazing letter that said something like, you're bound to find a fool to do this job for you, but it ain't going to be me, basically, which I was like, that dude is awesome. But somebody,
an Iraqi war veteran, Sarena. He's an Iraqi.
Yes.
Again, not a liberal. I don't know why people, they like to use these parroted talking points that are designed to entrap the low information person and voter. He is not a liberal. People do not arrest people because you're a Democrat or a Republican. That may have been the instance in a couple of rogue actors. James Comey, McCabe, the former FBI director, Andrew Weissman, Robert Mueller. Yes, and that will be or should be dealt with at a future date as far as the Trump DOJ or what the DOJ will do with it. But those were political prosecutions that were legitimately political.
Right.
Roger Stone's case had no criminal. There's not even a criminal act. Paul Manafort was charged for something they charged him with 10 years prior, and they didn't even go through with that case. These are things that are egregious. And President Trump's own case, yes, but not this case where Eric Adams, I just explained to you what witness tampering and obstruction of justice is. This is not, upgraded airline tickets, or it's a political thing where you were guilty of committing perjury in front of Congress, like they said Roger Stone did. That's the whole point of what I'm trying to say. So just continue what you were saying.
Yeah. And basically what you're doing is you're falling for Alex Spiro's talking points. If you're drinking that Kool-Aid, you're believing his defense attorney, and good for the defense attorney. That's his job, to try to convince people like you that he is not guilty, but he is. So they moved the prosecution to DC because nobody wants to do this, or the dropping of the prosecution, I should say, to DC, because nobody wants to drop this case who has any, backbone. Eventually, I guess like the entire Public Interest Bureau was held in a room, and we're told if somebody doesn't come up with their signature to dismiss this case in an hour, you're all getting fired. And so somebody basically stepped up and was like, I'll do it. Just to save my colleagues' jobs, I'll do it. And from what I heard, I think he did it. He put his signature on, and then he himself resigned after that. And so now you have this person, Antoinette Bacon, I guess, is the next person who is going to be handling this case, or, the dismissal of this case, and is going to have to answer to the judge when asked, why are you dismissing this case? Give me the reasons, because I need to make sure that it's not against the public interest in dismissing this case. So that's what you're seeing. You're basically seeing a bunch of different people having to step up and do the dirty work.
It's just unbelievable. What you're even saying here is highly unethical. It's unethical on many grounds. And I know people love to complain about the President, Joe Biden, DOJ, and Merrick Garland, but this is the same side. It's basically same coin, different side of it, because you're lawfaring a different way now. And I know people are going to go crazy when I say that, but you have to stand for something or stand for nothing at all. There is a rule of law in this country. And if it's used against you, you could prove your case in court, or, in Roger Stone's case, or Paul Manafort's case, or Mike Flynn's case, General Mike Flynn, or President Trump's own case. You can prove this. And I think whether they were found guilty or pardoned, they proved it in not only a court of law, whether they were found guilty or not, but essentially in the sphere of the public sphere, they're found not guilty. People believe that you use lawfare against these people in a political manner. And I would agree with that. And so do the majority of America who voted for President Trump. But now he has the baton, and this one issue, I don't know what is behind this. And I'm going to show you this document, because this continues. We just showed you one document. This is the reason that document was put into place. So here is the document, and this is the order from the judge, Judge Ho. And it says here, on February 14, 2025, the government filed a motion seeking dismissal without prejudice of the charge in this case with leave of the court pursuant to Rule 48A of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure, ECF number 122-1. The rule provides that the government may, with leave of court, dismiss an indictment, information, or complaint. As the Second Circuit has explained, Rule 48A was not promulgated to shift absolute power from the executive to the judicial branch. Rather, it was intended as a power to check power. The executive remains the absolute judge of whether a prosecution should be initiated, and the first and presumptively the best judge of whether a pending prosecution should be terminated. The exercise of its discretion with respect to the termination of pending prosecution should not be judiciously disturbed unless clearly contrary to manifest public interest. In this way, the essential function of each branch is synchronized to achieve a balance that serves both practical and constitutional. And it's referencing a case of USA versus Blasak. The government's determination to abandon a prosecution is entitled to great weight and to presumption of good faith. but it is not conclusive upon the court. Otherwise, there would be no purpose to Rule 48A, which requires leave of court to enter the dismissal. Now, again, it references another case, United States versus Greater Blouse, skirt and neckwear contractors. Thus, while there can be no doubt that the government has broad discretion in deciding which cases to prosecute and how to prosecute those cases, once the government has involved the judiciary by obtaining an indictment or conviction, its discretion is tempered by the court's independent obligations. Again, it references another thing, Blaszczak, Sullivan J. dissenting. Rule 48A, requirement of judicial leave, contemplates exposure of the reasons for dismissal. Another case, United States versus Ahmed Down. Since the court must exercise sound judicial discretion in considering a request for dismissal, it must have sufficient factual information supporting the recommendation. 3B Charles Allen Wright and Arthur R. Miller, Federal Practice and Procedure. In granting a motion under 48A, the court should be satisfied that the reasons advanced for the proposed dismissal are substantial. Back to Ahmed Down. The motion to dismiss states that defendant Eric Adams has consented in writing to this motion. See ECF number 122 at 1. But no such document has been provided to the court. Defendant is therefore ordered to file his consent in writing on the docket by 5 p.m. Eastern today. The parties are further ordered to appear before the court for a conference on February 19, 2025 at 2 p.m. in courtroom 318 of the Thurgood Marshall Courthouse, 40 Foley Square, New York, New York. The parties shall be prepared to address inter alia the reasons for the government's motion, the scope and effect of Mayor Adams' consent in writing, ECF number 122 at 1, and the procedure for resolution of the motion. So ordered February 18, 2025 by Judge Dale E. Ho. Sarena, give us your take on that, because you're a lawyer, and I understand it, but you tell my audience what that means.
My favorite part of that entire thing was that it's a power to check power. This judge has the power to check power. What that means is this. The prosecution put forth a motion to dismiss under this rule, Rule 48, which they're allowed to do. However, they're not allowed to do it unilaterally. Once you enter into an indictment, once an indictment is filed with the court, it doesn't give the court, overpower on top of SDNY, on top of the prosecutor, but it does give the judge some power to make final determinations with respect to whether an indictment will or will not proceed. So had they never filed anything with the court, had they never filed an indictment, they could have just chosen unilaterally not to bring an indictment, but they have. So now that the indictment exists, they cannot just dismiss the case. A judge dismisses a case, not the prosecutor. So now the judge is, obviously in possession of this information that this motion is being made for this dismissal. But the judge doesn't have a couple of things. The judge doesn't have the consent that Adams apparently signed off on. He wants that because that needs to be part of the record. He wants to know what the language of that consent was. I don't know, we don't know what that letter even says. We don't know, we have to have his signature on whatever it was that he consented to. So a judge needs to evaluate that consent. What is he even consenting to? But the bigger thing is that tomorrow, the parties have to now appear in front of Judge Ho to explain why they want to seek dismissal, right? 9 times out of 10, when a prosecution wants to dismiss a case, a judge goes along with it. Because as the case law says in this order, for the most part, we defer to the prosecution. The prosecution is in the best position to evaluate their evidence, the strength of the case, etc. However, Judge Ho must know that they're not seeking dismissal of this case based on the evidence. The stupid thing itself, right? The letter itself says we're not seeking dismissal because of a lack of evidence or because we don't believe he's guilty. The letter itself said that the reason for the dismissal was basically political in nature. And so the judge is now saying, listen, I need to make sure that we can dismiss this case in an appropriate way that doesn't negatively affect the public, right? That's essentially the standard, that although the prosecutor has the main discretion here, a judge could stop it. A judge could prevent the dismissal and not agree to dismiss the case if it goes against the substantial public interest. And that's what he needs to now do. And I think this is what Danielle Sassoon was referring to when she said the judge can conduct a searching inquiry. So he wants to know, what is the reason for this dismissal, and am I going to agree to it?
So bottom line here is this has become political theater in a place where you didn't want to make things political or politicize things. It's become political. And now the judge is going to exercise his rights to further entertain all this, because he could just dismiss this right now because they already filed this Article 48, but he's actually going to go through the motions and see what exactly in I guess political theater is the reasoning for this, and who is saying what and doing why, because you have these amicus briefs filed by these other attorneys. It's this. I've never seen anything like this. And for the extent that they're going for, you would think that, I mean, Eric Adams must be blood related to the president or someone in the DOJ, because what does this guy have special that nobody else has? I mean, like I said before, when President Trump was president and they were prosecuting Roger Stone and Mike Flynn, he didn't stop any of those trials, even though we knew that was as political as it got from the beginning on its face. Here, he just stops the case and there's no explanation why. But when the real political cases were on trial, nobody said anything. They was just says, let's see the trial, let's see the evidence, let's see where this goes. If you are truly innocent, prove it in court or expose how political this is. And I have another filing here. This is one last issue, and it comes from a friend of ours, Jason Goodman. So he puts lots of filings today ahead of Eric Adams' historic hearing tomorrow. Here's more correspondence from Elon Musk's dishonest attorney, Alex Spiro. Did email Bove just forget to include the consent letter, or does he not know what he's doing? and right here, it says here, Judge Ho, we write in response to the court's February 18, 2025 order that Mr. Adams filed a written consent referred to the government's motion to dismiss docket 122 at 1, docket 139. The written consent was transmitted via email from Mr. Adams' counsel to Mr. Bove on February 14, 2025, and is attached as Exhibit A on this letter. And I guess here's another one. I write on behalf of Mayor Eric Adams. Mayor Adams agrees to dismissal without prejudice of the charge against him, and that he is not a prevailing party under the Hyde Amendment, Pub I 105-119, November 26, 1997, in the above referenced case. Obviously, Alex Spiro is some kind of agreement with both and not the court. I'm lost. I'm lost with all this stuff.
I'm lost myself. I actually am wondering if they backdated that. Because I don't even know if he really did consent in writing. He might have just said that he consented in writing. I think it says February 14th, and I'm wondering if that was backdated. I don't know. But I'm just so curious, because I just feel like everything is so sleazy in this entire situation that I don't trust any of it. I really don't. And I'm so excited to hear what happens tomorrow at 2:00, because I want to know what they're going to tell Judge Ho to try to convince him to dismiss this case. I am genuinely curious.
Tomorrow means today at 2:00, by the way. But it will be
today.
Today at 2:00. We will, right after you watch this show, stay tuned. Hopefully they air this thing live. So actually, there's more things that were occurring today, and it's always in regards to this. Scootercast NY, Olia Scootercast at Scootercast NY. She posted this, and it's so important because they had this big thing that they had a big meeting, Kathy Hochul, all these politicians, in regards to what they're going to do with Eric Adams here. So this was what she wrote. Now, this is not about a friendship. I'm going to stand up for what I believe. This is about what is right. Al Sharpton spoke outside of Governor Hochul's office after attending a meeting discussion on possible removal of Mayor Eric Adams. So I'm going to play this for the audience and get your take, Sarena.
Okay.
Yeah, this is not about a friendship. This is about, I'm going to stand up for what I believe. I've had friends that I campaigned against at all. This is about what is right and what's going to be a precedent.
Reverend, if the charges are dropped, do you think that the governor could still seek the mayor's removal, even if the charges are dropped tomorrow?
I just said, that there are two ways, I understand, whether or not there's a crime or whether there's enough of an outcry of the city or a given city that you've lost the public trust. And the question is, if there's no crime and you go to public trust, how do we gauge the public trust?
Reverend, she could ask him to resign. Should she do that?
You should ask her that. What I thought, I told the governor.
Right now, was this a political or? Thank you very much.
So what are your thoughts seeing that?
Harsh words from Al Sharpton. I love it. I will say, on a personal level, since I think Eric Adams is really the slimiest mayor I've ever seen. And he did not ever deserve to be mayor. And he's just a bad person. I enjoy watching people who used to stand for him, like who just were like Adams fans, Adams friends, Adam whatever, fall away. Like, I like to see people recognizing what we already knew for a very long time about Eric Adams and be willing to, I guess, put their feelings aside, put their friendships aside. I don't know. Al Sharpton is a very interesting figure. I have disagreed with him on a lot of things that he's done in the past. But I don't have anything necessarily personal against him. I guess watching that, I'm just kind of happy that if he really does feel like he's doing the right thing, I think what he's doing is the right thing by not standing by Eric Adams. It sounds to me like he told Hochul to get rid of Adams, just based on, the words he was using and his body language there. And if he did, I support it. It goes back to what you and I were saying, Sal. It doesn't matter if we like you, if we don't like you. It is what it is. You follow the evidence, you follow the law. And if Al Sharpton has not followed the law before, or he's supported people who haven't followed the law before, okay. But right now, he happens to be agreeing with the law. He happens to be in the right. So I'm glad that Al Sharpton is not, supporting Eric Adams. I'm glad that anybody is not supporting Eric Adams, because in this scenario, he needs to be removed.
I'm going to tell you this, and I'm going to be 43 years old on Friday. I have never agreed with Al Sharpton in my life. I just think the guy, another sleazy, grimy, huckster. But even though they say a broken clock is right twice a day, I agree with him in what he stated, that he actually said that he should be pardoned at this point. You either pardon Eric Adams or don't use him as a pawn, which is what's going on. Again, this is political. For someone who came into office saying no more lawfare, no more politicization, I cannot for the life of me wrap my head around what is the purpose of all of this. By the way, I didn't state this, but it should be stated that in Danielle Sasson's memo, it referenced that this case was opened and started in 2017 under the original Trump Justice Department. It wasn't even Joe Biden had anything to do with Damian Williams, who got the case in passing. And it mentions in the memo how Damian Williams, the only thing he did was look at what the supervisor of the public corruption unit did, opened it up, looked at it, said, oh, well, there's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing bad with this. Approves it and hands it back.
Yeah.
That's all Damian Williams did. He never personally handled the case. His op-ed, whether you like him or not, never referenced Eric Adams, and it said that New York City is run by a broken compass. He means New York City and New York as a whole politically is corrupt. It's the same thing Rudy Giuliani says. But now everyone says he's a quack, I guess. So they use what Rudy Giuliani says when it's good for them. And when they don't like him, they're not going to use what he said. But he said New York City's default position is corruption. That is what he said. Now I wanted to show you another article that's got nothing to do with Eric, but it has the same kind of overtures, and it just, came out in the last 24 hours. So I'll get your take on this.
Cool.
Let's see right here. Convicted former Nassau County Executive Ed Mangano has 2 bribery charges reversed. Okay, so convicted former Nassau County Executive Ed Mangano just caught a break in court with the reversal of 2 charges against him stemming from a notorious bribery scheme. The imprisoned Long Island Republican ran the county from 2010 to 2017 have been sentenced to 12 years in prison in 2022 for accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars in kickbacks from local restaurateur Harindra Singh. Singh, who testified against Mangano in 2019, provided 5-pay vacation, a lavish watch, $3,600 vibrating chair. Interesting. Home, hardwood flooring, and a $100,000 per year no-show job for Mangano's now convicted wife, Linda, in exchange for Mangano pressuring local officials to help him obtain $20 million in bank loans, prosecutors said. But a federal appeals court last week reversed Mangano's conviction on the counts of federal programs, bribery, and conspiracy to commit federal programs bribery, saying the evidence was insufficient, Newsday reported. The court decided that Mangano could not be convicted on those charges because he was technically not an official of that specific town at that time. The government presented no evidence at trial that Mangano had authority to act on behalf of the town, nor that he was an employee or representative of the town, according to the appeals court decision. The case has now been remanded to a district court for resentencing. Mangano's other charges including honest services for the conspiracy to obstruct justice, still stand, and prosecutors will ask the court to stick with its 12-year prison term. The outlet today.
You know, each case has its own very specific fact pattern here. And as you know, prosecution has to prove every single element of every single crime beyond a reasonable doubt if they want a conviction. It sounds like the bribery counts on that guy, on Mangano's case, were not technically able to be fulfilled because he wasn't in a position of power at the time, or a position of that he could, benefit from that bribe. Eric Adams' case, I believe, is a bit different because I think he either at the time was in a position of power or he was going to be in a position of power to be able to accept that bribe and give the favor in return. And in fact, the prosecution has evidence, the SDNY had evidence that Eric Adams did do that for the Turkish government, right? He was like opening up the Turkish embassy before it was technically safe to do so, violating all sorts of fire codes and permissions and things like that, and receiving benefits, including, yes, the different hotels and tickets and things like that. So I think that every case is a little bit different. This does have kind of similar vibes to Eric Adams's case because it's a similar charge. It's the same charge, in fact, but I don't think that Adams was in the same position as the Nassau County guy. And I think that's where these things differ. Plus, even if one were to say that, his other charges still did stick. The Long Island guy's charges did stick, aside from the bribery charges. And I think that Eric Adams's other charges would still stick as well, such as the campaign finances and the superseding indictment that Danielle Sassoon referenced was coming down the pike with respect to tampering with witnesses and tampering with evidence. So there was only one bribery charge out of the 5 counts against Eric Adams. And so even if that one bribery charge was dismissed and the rest still stood, he'd still be facing criminal penalties.
Yeah. I was trying to reference one case because it's sort of similar, political, politician, bribery, but they let him off that, and still with the other convictions, he's not going anywhere. He shouldn't be going anywhere anyway. I mean, that's what started. But speaking again of Eric Adams, I'm going to give you a couple of instances of why dismissing this case will now affect other instances that this man has tentacles into virtually everything that's been going on in New York City that sounds corrupt. Here's an article from the New York Post. It's by Carl Campanell. New York City heliport operator urges criminal probe after Adams administration awards contract to firm with foreign ties. I mean, this is like over and over again with this guy, Eric Adams. The longtime operator of the downtown heliport is pushing for a formal investigation to a contract given to its replacement by the Adams administration, the Post has learned. Sacker Aviation, which has run the city-owned heliport for 18 years, filed the latest objection after the City Economic Development Corporation picked the Downtown Skyport LLC to run the facility, which is used by President Trump's Marine One and by U.S. military and federal law enforcement officials. We write to you to express our strong belief that a criminal investigation should be commenced immediately into this matter. SACR Chairman William Wachtel said in a February 14th letter to DOI Commissioner Jocelyn Strauber. If city officials were aware of illegal activity and chose to ignore it, that should be investigated as well, Wachtel said. The replacement company is a partnership that includes Skyport Infrastructure, the UK-based Sky Sports firm, and the operator of the London Heliport and France's Group ADP, which operates Paris's 3 airports. Wachtel said the replacement group should be disqualified because it appeared to have made material misrepresentations to the EDC that include allegedly concealing felonious activity by Group ADAP, subsidiaries with projects in Croatia, Madagascar, Libya, and the United Arab Emirates. Wachtel said in the letter that there were 4 separate patterns of collusion and bribery by Group ADP and subsidiaries with airport development projects overseas that resulted in 2 deferred prosecution agreements with French authorities. Those deals included a $15 million fine in 2023 and debarment by the World Bank Group in 2022, the letter stated. DOI declined to comment. Last week, Wachtel appealed to City Comptroller Brad Lander to reject the contract for the same reasons. The Comptroller's office said the contract is still under review. In a statement to the Post last week, EDC defended the new contract with the Downtown Skyport Consortium, but said SACR's new objection was being reviewed. Skyport won the contract via a competitive bidding process. Both of its foreign companies have developed the use of quieter electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, a top priority of Mayor Eric Adams. Helicopter noise has long been a major bane of New York City residents, with 59,000 complaints recorded last year. On its face, this under-review acknowledgement leads to one ineluctable conclusion, to wit, that the city was not aware of this company's serial criminal conduct, Wachtel said. Skyport declined to comment. Sarena, I mean, this sounds like more fiasco under Eric Adams.
My God, everything that Eric Adams touches turns to you know what. I don't want to get banned, but it's so true. And the problem is this, right? This defines the problem. The problem is when you have a corrupt official running New York City, everything he touches is going to be suspect. Nobody is going to trust the decisions that he makes, the contracts that he enters into, the relationships that he pursues. Nobody, because he is tainted. And with our New York City leader being tainted, everything our leader touches is tainted and is suspicious. And, this could very well be a nothing burger. This could very well be, that we did want to, not use the same contract anymore because these people with this new contract know how to reduce helicopter noise, which I did not think was such a big deal in New York City, by the way. But maybe it really is nothing, but nobody can trust any of these contracts. Nobody can trust any of Eric Adams's relationships because everyone knows he's corrupt. So everybody who's saying, his charges should be dropped, blah, blah, blah. How do you feel about all of the things that he does? Don't you feel suspicious about all of the contracts he enters into and all of the people that he introduces and all of the friends and family that he hires and what they're doing behind closed doors? Because if you do, then you agree that he's corrupt and that you agree that his prosecution should probably continue or at least not be dismissed when it's not based off of the merits. So that's how I feel about this. I feel like we should be suspicious of everything Eric Adams does.
So here, once again, the Department of Investigation should be investigating something that has tentacles back to Eric Adams, who loves foreign countries. I mean, he goes to the Irish parade. He says New York is the Dublin of New York. He goes to, he'll go to another parade. He'll say this is the Turkey of New York. He'll say that this is the Rome of New York. Depending on what ethnic group is having a party, he's going to say that. Now all of these things are adding up, all these little nuggets. Here's one instance of corruption right there. They can look at this and already this stinks to high heaven. Now We're going to go back in time. We remember how on this show, on the Finest Unfiltered, we kept screaming about Conso Frito and the New York City Police Department involved with politicians like Carl Hastie and Letitia James and Eric Adams and the Lieutenant Governor Anthony Delgado. All these people that are now ganging up on Eric Adams were all hanging out with a mob associate and self-admitted criminal, Jimmy Rodriguez, who somehow is tied to everyone. P. Diddy, Jay-Z, President Bush, Hillary Clinton, Eric Adams. The list could go on and on and on. He's always around these people, and a ton of criminal and felons that hang out in all his places. Street thugs. So they were hanging out in this place, and one of the allegations that came out is not only that this place had human trafficking, which was reported to the New York City Police Department, but yet that report vanished when Eric Adams became the mayor. And then, of course, Ed Caban, the brother of the owner of this place, who was a retired NYPD lieutenant himself, they were in business. They had an illegal shed that they never got a permit for, yet they were approved from the Department of Buildings to get a liquor license from the SLA because they never said anything about it. So they were partying illegally. It's everything that's wrong was wrong there. But this crew, we call them the Consofrito crew, which is the upper echelon of police department. Eric Adams, Letitia James, all these people met this eclectic group, and it said that they were now. Eddie Caban has a twin brother. His name is James Caban, who was thrown off the job. He's a mess, but he looks just like him. And it was alleged that he is involved in a shakedown of nightclubs, a nightclub extortion racket. There was one instance of a place in Coney Island, which was a juice bar turned restaurant, turned nightclub at night, and he was being harassed by the police department. And then when he finally called and dealt with someone from the office of the mayor of nightlife, think about that. Another Eric Adams crony, Ray Jenkins, referred to him to James Caban, and a text message said, well, if you pay him such and such amount, these problems go away. So there is an instance of that. But now we have real evidence, because over the weekend, there was a lawsuit filed by Eric Sanders, once again, with a lieutenant that could unequivocally prove there is an extortion racket that went on. So let me read this off to you and to the audience. And this is the best article because it comes straight from a press release from the Eric Sanders, the lawyer. Veteran NYPD lieutenant files EEOC charge alleging racial discrimination, retaliation, and corruption within the department. February 13, 2025, Lieutenant Emilio C. Rodriguez, a decorated officer with over 2 decades of service in the New York City Police Department, has filed a charge of discrimination with the United States Equal Opportunity Commission, EEOC, against the City of New York NYPD Legal Bureau. The charge filed on the EEOC charge number 520-2025-03104 alleges that the NYPD engaged in racial discrimination, subjecting him to hostile work environment, and retaliated against him for exposing corruption and misconduct within the department. Rodriguez asserts that he became the target of a systematic retaliation after refusing to comply with selective enforcement practices that shielded certain nightlife establishments from legal scrutiny due to their connections with high-ranking NYPD officials. He further contends that his refusal to participate in these corrupt practices resulted in an ongoing campaign of intimidation, professional sabotage, and efforts to destroy his career. According to the charge, Rodriguez witnessed a coordinated effort by senior officials, including Commanding Officer Enuidi Castillo, Executive Officer Erickson Peralta, Special Operations Lieutenant Michael J. DeSanto, and former Administrative Lieutenant Jonathan Cruz within the 34th Precinct, which covers Washington Heights, to selectively enforce or ignore laws based on personal relationships and undisclosed financial interests. He specifically alleges that James Caban, the twin brother of former Police Commissioner Edward A. Caban, maintained an undisclosed relationship with Castillo. This resulted in regular phone calls and in-person meetings where selective enforcement decisions were made. These discussions allegedly determined which businesses and individuals within the Washington Heights area were subject to police action and which were shielded from enforcement. As a result, certain nightclubs and lounges with ties to the former commissioner's family were deliberately exempted from law enforcement oversight, regardless of the volume of the complaints or criminal activities reported at those locations. Rodriguez claims that the officers were explicitly ordered to disregard violations and close out 311 complaints about these establishments without taking action. Despite numerous reports involving crimes such as noise violations, illegal activities, and disturbances, Castillo and DeSanto directed officers to refrain from enforcement efforts and suppress any police response. Rodriguez, responsible for overseeing operations, questions these unlawful practices which he believes led to immediate retaliation against him. The charge details a pattern of financial misconduct within the department, including manipulating overtime assignments for personal gain. Rodriguez states that Castillo ensured that Lieutenant DeSanto and Officer Vincent G. Bracco were granted no less than 40 hours of overtime per month despite not performing legitimate law enforcement duties. Overtime codes intended for specific events, including Israeli protests, were misused to funnel taxpayer money into the paychecks of favored officers. DeSanto received a discretionary promotion to Lieutenant Special Assignment in exchange for their loyalty, while Castillo was overlooked despite expecting his promotion. Rodriguez contends that his refusal to participate in these fraudulent practices led to further targeting by Castillo and his associates. The charge also alleges that Rodriguez endured a hostile work environment where Castillo and DeSanto openly referred to themselves as the mafia and warned him that if one of them had a problem with him, the entire family did. The workplace hostility escalated after Rodriguez went on a medical leave due to a cardiac condition. During this time, Castillo called him repeatedly, accusing him of playing sick and demanded that he work from home despite his medical restrictions. On several occasions, Castillo launched profanity-laced tirades over the phone, which were overheard by Rodriguez's 10-year-old child, causing lasting emotional distress. When Rodriguez resisted these demands, Castillo took further retaliatory action by making false allegations about his mental health, which resulted in the unjust removal of his firearm and his placement on restricted duty. Rodriguez's EOC filing details how Castillo and his associates deliberately undermined his career by blocking his overtime, reassigning him to the midnight shift, and falsely reporting him as insubordinate to superior officers. Castillo allegedly contacted Rodriguez's new command and instructed them not to extend him any professional courtesies, ensuring his reputation was tarnished. His opportunities for advancement within the NYPD were severely limited. In addition to the financial misconduct and retaliation, the charge outlines allegations of sexual misconduct within the department, specifically involving Lieutenant DeSanto and former domestic violence Sergeant Christina Ortiz. Rodriguez states that DeSanto and Ortiz engaged in an inappropriate sexual relationship within 34th precinct offices, including the domestic violence office and the commanding officer's office, with clear evidence left behind, such as broken nails found in offices where these encounters occurred. Rodriguez contends that Castillo was fully aware of this misconduct but chose to ignore it, further reinforcing the department's corruption culture. Despite meeting all qualifications necessary for reinstatement of full duty, Rodriguez remains unjustly restricted with no explanation. The charge states that his prolonged restriction is a direct act of retaliation designed to diminish his career and silence his ongoing concerns regarding NYPD misconduct. The refusal to reinstate him to full duty has negatively impacted his ability to earn overtime, pursue promotions, and perform his responsibilities as a law enforcement officer. Through his EOC charge, Rodriguez seeks multiple remedies, including full reinstatement to duty, removal of all retaliatory employment actions from his record, compensatory damages for lost wages and emotional distress, and an independent federal investigation into NYPD's systematic corruption and selective enforcement practice. His attorney, Eric Sanders, Esquire, stated, Lieutenant Rodriguez has dedicated over 2 decades to protecting and serving the people of New York, only to be repaid with retaliation, racial discrimination, and workplace harassment for doing the right thing. His case is a glaring example of the corruption within the NYPD's upper ranks. No officer should be punished for refusing to engage in selective enforcement, payroll fraud, and other cover-ups. We are calling for a full federal investigation into the practice of the NYPD and those responsible for Lieutenant Rodriguez's mistreatment. The EEOC has officially acknowledged receipt of the charge and notified the City of New York NYPD Legal Bureau. Under federal guidelines, the NYPD has 10 days to respond. The case may also be referred to state and local employment practice agencies, FEPAs, for concurrent investigation. Now, Sarena, I have now learned in the last few days, the community in Washington Heights is calling media, elected officials. They're saying that all their complaints they could prove have not been answered. They basically what we call shit canning them. And what happened is they actually heard me on the Sid Rosenberg reference this case. It riled them up. They also called Eric Sanders. There is a lot of commotion in that precinct. So I don't know what you could say about this. This is disgusting. And again, who was in charge? Who was their friend? Who was involved in this nightclub extortion racket thing? Mayor Eric Adams and Eddie Caban standing right next to him. What are your thoughts?
Yep. My thoughts are the same as they were before, which is everything that Eric Adams touches goes to hell. Because, this is what is, first of all, the allegations in this filing track, right? We have heard over the last 3 years so many iterations of these very same things, between the sexual misconduct, the overtime abuse, the retribution against any sort of whistleblowers, all of it. Literally all of it tracks, and they obviously spared no one, right? They didn't learn, certainly, from their errors from the beginning of Eric Adams's, ascent into mayorship. They haven't learned anything. They continue to do the things that they do. They continue to run it like a bully gang. And these are the fallouts, and we all have to pay for it. All of us New York City dwellers have to pay for all of these lawsuits to get settled. And now Eric Sanders is going to have a line of witnesses to use in his case, on behalf of these people, because they are all going to be consistent in their stories. They're all going to give their personal experiences. And look, if they don't really know each other very well, I mean, I'm sure some of the people within the community know each other, but as a former police officer, if people keep coming in with the same story and they don't know each other well, or they haven't collaborated or colluded, and yet their stories match, that's going to be a pretty bad look. I think the city is going to look. I don't even know anymore. I really don't. But if I were the city, I would quietly settle this case, because it sounds like they have, if it goes through the discovery process, it's going to uncover a hell of a lot of corruption and a lot more trouble for Eric Adams and Caban and everybody else in the gang.
And again, all roads lead back to Costa Frito, where everything and anything was happening. Once again, just to throw that in there. I'm being proven correct. What people like to say, you have an axe to grind. Why is this crew constantly committing the same acts? And it doesn't matter whether it's Concha Frito, the 3-4 precinct, Zona de Cuba, the One Police Plaza, this other place in Konya. It's the same crew doing the same things all the time, party all the time. Now, because, that other place with that other gaffe with Raul Stevenson having a party where they were judging who had the best female. That was another.
It's the place in New Rochelle.
Yeah, it's just the same repeated pattern of abuse here by this police department and Eric Adams' administration, which is why President Trump should really reconsider what they're doing, because, of course, the allegations and everything that happens goes back to Eric Adams. That's why the Public Corruption Unit had 200 cases. Right now, there are only 3 attorneys left in this unit, and they have no access to any of the computers. And to just close this out, Eric Adams had 4 deputy mayors resign. Of course, there are 2 ways to remove them, as Al Sharpton said. One is obviously the city charter would allow for a inability committee, which would be the city comptroller, the speaker of city council, the eldest borough president, the head of corporation council, and the deputy mayor of Eric Adams choosing. Of course, 4 already gone. The other 4 are considering, or whatever's going on is a lot of mishigas. And of course, Kathy Hochul could remove them, putting up a fake trial or whatever it is for the public to see. So these are the 2 options that are there. But of course, the city is being distracted by Eric Adams. Therefore, by Friday, he must set forth some plan for the future of New York City to the comptroller and to the city council. So if not, they're probably going to move ahead. But that's what today's discussion was about. So, Sarena, what do you see going forward, New York City and Eric Adams in closing? Are they going to do this? Are they not? But Friday's the deadline.
It's a toughie. I think a lot is going to depend on a lot of other people. I think that their best bet is with Hochul removing him, because I think that's going to require fewer moving parts. As you said, the inability committee requires the kind of assent of several different people.
3 out of 5.
And so it's a little bit easier for Hochul to do it. That's for removal. With respect to the dropping of the case, that's going to be on Judge Ho, it looks like, at this point, and good for him for kind of going as much and as deep as he needs to go to really understand what the motivation is behind the request for this dismissal. And look, if you would have asked me on most cases whether I think a judge is going to go along with a request to dismiss a case, I would say it's a no-brainer. A judge is going to defer to the prosecution. But here, because of, what you call the political theater, I agree. It's blown up to such a capacity that it's very important for there to be a real inquiry into why this is being dropped. And I think that it is possible that Judge Ho either may not drop the case or might delay this and do a searching inquiry to see what the hell this is all about before making a final decision. So I think the best bet is we got to see what Judge Ho does. I think Hochul might take her lead from him. You know what I mean? Like, I think one is going to depend on the next. So I'm really excited to see what this week brings.
Yeah, and I will never rule out a state prosecution. Also,
yes,
we know that Lieutenant Quatisha Epps' federal case, of course, as you learned, in my own case, my lawyer had to file a letter to the court in regards to my own case, which mentioned that Quatisha Epps her case was intervened by the Southern District of New York and the FBI, which is why you saw raids. So her case is in federal hands. And of course, she made reference of the upper echelon of New York City Police Department and, because it's in the EEOC complaint, and the office of the mayor. Where does this investigation go? Because there's 3 attorneys now in public corruption unit. And of course, now you can't investigate Eric Adams apparently because he could do anything he wants. He's running for office. Don't touch him. So this is a mess. I don't know what else to say about this. So, Sarena, this has been a great hour. Of course, you're going to be back in the future to discuss more legal matters. We don't know where this is going to go. We'll see how Friday ends up for this. I don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow, to be honest, with Eric Adams. But where could people catch you online, and how do they reach you if they want to use you as their attorney, which I would highly endorse people do?
Thank you, Sal. As to that, you can find me on my website, www.townsendlawnyc.com. That's my law firm website, Townsend Law. And as for me personally, I'm all over the socials. I'm on X as Townsend Sarena. I'm on Instagram as Sarena T, SarenaTee. And I'm on TikTok as Sarena Townsend. I'm everywhere. So you'll find me. Thanks, Sal.
Thank you, Sarena. So that's a wrap here from the Sal Greco Show. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see where all of this goes. I mean, this is a documentary and a book all into one. Crumbs, the documentary. And it's going to be written by John D. Macari, Eric Dim, and myself, and Marlon Bethel. And we'll have a little page for Sarena Townsend, who is excellent in her legal theories and expertise. Thank you, Sarena. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you later on this week. God bless everyone.
Take care.